I buried my 8-year-old son, Jacob, alone under the relentless New Orleans sun. The air was so thick with humidity, it felt like breathing through a damp towel. I kept looking toward the cemetery gates, waiting for a car, a text, anything. But there was nothing. No mother, no father, no sister. Just the awful silence of a grave that felt too small. As the first shovel of dirt hit the wood, my phone buzzed. I hoped for an apology. Instead, I saw a Zillow link from my mother. A $1.5 million estate. The caption read, "Fresh start." While I was putting my child in the ground, my family was shopping. My name is Rachel, and for 32 years, I had been the silent ghost in the machinery of this family. Have you ever felt like the invisible one in your own family? Let me know your story down in the comments. I would love to know who is part of our community. The drive back to the Garden District was a 2-mile wake. The back seat of my old sedan was overflowing with the flower arrangements from the service. Hundreds of white lilies, their scent so thick and cloying it felt like a physical weight pressing against my chest. It smelled like a funeral parlor, like finality, like the end of the world compressed into a short drive. I kept the air conditioning on full blast, letting the freezing air hit the sweat drying on my black dress, but it did not help. The stench of those flowers followed me, a sharp reminder of the fake sympathy my family had sent in their place. When I unlocked the door to my apartment, the silence did not feel peaceful. It felt heavy, vibrating with the absence of an 8-year-old boy. I walked into the kitchen, threw my keys on the counter, and stared at the empty space where Jacob used to sit for breakfast every morning. I waited for the breakdown. I waited for my knees to buckle, for the sobbing to start, for the grief to swallow me whole. That is what a mother is supposed to do. But the breakdown did not come. Instead, a strange, icy clarity settled over me. It started at the base of my spine and worked its way up, cooling the heat of the New Orleans sun that had been baking into my skin. My vision sharpened until everything in the room looked high definition and hard-edged. I looked at the dust on the counter. I looked at the stack of bills. I looked at the Zillow link still glowing on my phone screen. This was not a tragedy anymore. It was a balance sheet. And for 32 years, I had been the silent investor in their version of family, footing every bill while they reaped the rewards. I walked over to my laptop and opened it. I did not need a shoulder to cry on. I needed data. I logged into the account for the florist my mother used for every birthday and anniversary. I had her password because I was the one who usually ordered the gifts she took credit for. It was just another task on my long list of daughterly duties. I found the order for the funeral spray, the wall of lilies currently wilting in my back seat. I looked at the date stamp. The order had been placed 14 days ago. The air left my lungs for a second. They had not missed the funeral because of a last-minute crisis or a delayed flight. They had not been stuck in traffic or suffered a sudden illness. They had pre-ordered those flowers 2 weeks in advance. 14 days ago, while I was still praying for a miracle in the hospital, they were already scheduling their absence. They had booked their betrayal like a routine medical checkup. I sat there in the blue glow of the screen, staring at the numbers. 14 days. 2 weeks of lies. 2 weeks of them knowing exactly where they would be when I was standing at that grave. And they were across town, drinking champagne and looking at an estate they intended to buy with my son's blood money. Anger was not loud this time. It was clinical. My compassion had been a luxury they had overdrafted for my entire life, and I was finally looking at the statement. The account was overdrawn. This was not going to be a breakdown. This was going to be an accounting. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the laptop across the room. I just sat there, and the last little piece of hope I had been holding on to, the childish hope that my mother loved me, that my father protected me, snapped. It was a clean break. I opened a new tab, my banking portal. I pulled up the high-limit credit card I had shared with my sister, Madison. I had added her as an authorized user 3 years ago when she claimed she needed help building credit. I scrolled through the recent transactions. While I was at the funeral home picking out a casket for my son, she had spent $400 at a boutique in New Orleans. While I was writing Jacob's eulogy, she was at a high-end sushi restaurant. I clicked Remove Authorized User. Confirmed. The card was dead. Next, I navigated to the smart home app for our vacation cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains. They called it the family cabin, but my name was the only one on the deed. I had bought it with the settlement from my divorce, a place for Jacob to see snow. My parents used it every other weekend to host their friends, playing the wealthy retirees while I paid the property taxes and the $4,500 maintenance fees. I selected the digital lock. Change access code. I deleted my father's code. I deleted my mother's code. I deleted Madison's code. I set a new master PIN. Access denied. I went down the list methodically, severing every digital tendril they had wrapped around my life. Then, I pulled up a spreadsheet I had hidden deep in my hard drive. I called it the ledger. It started 4 years ago, right after my father, Christopher, retired early because he decided he deserved a break. Row 1, $96,000. That was the total I had paid toward their second mortgage. Every month, like clockwork, $2,000 left my account and went into theirs. I remembered the first time I sent it. My mother, Melissa, had called me in tears, saying they were going to lose the house. "We sacrificed everything for you girls," she had sobbed. "And now we have nothing." I felt guilty. So, I paid. And when I told them, my father didn't say thank you, he just said, "Good girl. At least you're making yourself useful." I scrolled down to row 12, Madison's influencer trip to Tulum. She couldn't afford the flight, and my mother cornered me, calling me selfish for wanting to keep my savings. I paid for the flight. Madison posted 30 photos from that trip. I wasn't tagged in a single one. I used to wonder why I let it go on this long. I realize now that I was caught in the invisible chains of the survivor. It was like a prison without bars. They had trained me like a stray dog. They starved me of affection for weeks, making me feel invisible, and then, just when I was about to walk away, they would throw me a scrap. A text that said, "Thinking of you," or a hug that lasted 2 seconds too long. I would eat it up, wagging my tail and coming back, thinking that if I just tried harder, they would finally love me. Psychologists call it intermittent reinforcement. It's the most powerful way to condition a behavior, keeping you addicted to the possibility of love. But looking at the ledger now, seeing those cold, hard numbers, the addiction broke. My compassion had been a luxury they had overdrawn for years. I was done being a resource. The pounding on my door started at exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It was not a request, it was the heavy, entitled banging of people who believed they owned the building. I checked the peephole and saw them, Christopher and Melissa. My parents. I unlocked the deadbolt, and before I could even draw a breath, Christopher pushed past me. The thick New Orleans heat followed him in like a physical wave. He did not look at me. He walked straight to my kitchen, opened the refrigerator, and began pulling things out. "Expired," he muttered, tossing a carton of milk into the trash. "Wilted," he said, throwing away a bag of fresh spinach. He was performing a wellness check, but it felt like a raid. He was building a case. He wanted to show I could not even buy groceries, that I was unable to function. Melissa stood in the hallway, her eyes sweeping over my walls where I had hung my latest restoration projects. "It is so dark in here, Rachel," she said, her voice trembling with a rehearsed fragility. "And this work, it is obsessive. It is not healthy. You are spiraling." I leaned against the door frame and crossed my arms. I did not feed into the drama. I just asked, "What do you want?" Melissa reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a thick document clipped with a blue backing. She placed it on the coffee table like a sacred text. "We want to save you," she whispered, her eyes wet with fake tears. "We spoke to a specialist. He agrees that you are displaying signs of a psychotic break. The isolation, the aggression, cutting off your sister, it is all there." She pointed at the papers. "This is a voluntary conservatorship. Just for the financial side. Just until you are stable again. We will manage Jacob's $2,800,000 trust. We will make sure the bills get paid. You won't have to worry about a thing. I looked at those papers. They did not want to save me, they wanted control. This is what is known as the trap of cruel normalization. Over decades, families like mine normalize their own cruelty to maintain their egos. In their minds, they are not thieves stealing a dead child's inheritance, they are the heroic martyrs stepping in to rescue their broken daughter. They have to believe I am crazy, because if I am sane, then they have to admit they are monsters. Their egos simply cannot handle that reality. It is a specific form of narcissism called the savior gaslight. And if I do not sign? I asked, my voice as flat as a balance sheet. Christopher slammed the refrigerator door shut. Then we call the authorities, he said, wiping his hands on his pants. We file for an involuntary hold. We tell them you are a danger to yourself. We have neighbor statements. We have the emails you sent Madison. I froze. I had not sent Madison any emails. They were forging evidence. They had it all planned, the legal threat, the social proof, the emotional blackmail. Outside, I saw Madison's car parked in the fire lane. She was sitting in the driver's seat, her phone mounted on the dashboard, the ring light reflecting in her sunglasses. She was live streaming. I could practically see the caption, Intervention Day. Pray for my family. She was monetizing my supposed breakdown in real time, building a public narrative so that when they took the money, the world would applaud them for stepping up. I need to think, I said. I needed them to leave before I did something that would actually prove them right. You have 24 hours, Christopher said. Tomorrow at noon, or we call the police. They left the papers on the table. As they walked out, Melissa paused and touched my cheek. Her hand was ice cold. We love you, Rachel, she said. We are doing this because we love you. I locked the door and slid the chain into place. The sound of the metal sliding into the groove was the only honest thing I had heard all day. I looked at the conservatorship documents lying on my coffee table, the blue backing looking like a bruise against the wood. They thought they had checkmated me. They thought they were the grandmasters of this game, but they forgot one thing. They were playing checkers. I had already hired a professional to handle the board. I didn't let myself look at the photos of Jacob. I couldn't afford the luxury of grief, not when my parents were trying to turn my life into a prison. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had saved under a fake name. Eric answered on the second ring. He didn't say hello. He just gave me an address in a part of the city where the buildings didn't have names, only numbers. The transition from my Garden District apartment to Eric's office was a blur of gray concrete and neon lights. The office felt more like a bunker than a law firm. There were no mahogany desks or leather chairs here. Instead, servers hummed along one wall, their blue and green lights blinking like a digital heartbeat. Kelly, my late husband's aunt and a retired judge, sat at the head of a metal table. She was sharp-eyed and unsentimental. She was exactly the kind of ally you wanted when your own blood had turned into venom. We are moving past the emotional phase and into the discovery phase, Kelly said. Her voice was like gravel, steady and unyielding. She didn't offer me coffee. She didn't ask how I was holding up. She knew I was here for an audit, not a therapy session. We found the reason they are so desperate, Rachel, Eric said. He didn't look up from his screen. He was typing with a rhythmic precision that matched the humming of the servers. He slid a tablet across the table toward me. It wasn't a bank statement. It was a ledger from an illegal gambling ring operating out of Atlanta. Madison's name was everywhere, Eric said flatly. She didn't just lose a few hands of poker. She went deep. She owes $850,000. The number should have shocked me, but it just felt like another data point. $850,000. That was why she was live streaming my intervention. She wasn't looking for likes, she was looking for a payout. Your parents co-signed for the debt, Kelly added. She opened a manila folder and laid out a series of documents. These are not banks, Rachel. These are loan sharks. They do not file lawsuits. They do not care about credit scores. They have 48 hours before this situation gets violent. That is why your father was in your kitchen checking for expired milk. They are on a deadline. Everything suddenly made sense. The panic disguised as concern. The threats disguised as love. The sudden, urgent need to manage Jacob's $2,800,000 trust fund. They didn't want to save my sanity. They wanted to save their own skin. In their world, my son's life insurance was just a liquidity event. They have already prepared the court filings, Kelly said, tapping a finger on a document. They have affidavits from neighbors you haven't spoken to in years. They have forged emails from your account claiming you are suicidal. They built a story, Rachel. They are ready to destroy you to get that money. I looked at the forged emails. They were clever. They used my voice, my patterns. But they were made of air. I have data, too, I said. I pulled out my phone and accessed my cloud storage. My smartwatch tracked my heart rate and sleep patterns. It showed I was in a deep sleep on the night they claimed I was having a manic episode. I have security footage from the hallway that proves I was quietly painting a watercolor when they claimed I was destroying furniture and screaming. Eric smiled for the first time. If they submit those lies to a judge under oath, it is not just a family dispute anymore. It is felony perjury. They are walking into a trap of their own making. We need a sting, Kelly said. We cannot just tell them we know. We have to let them commit the crime. We have to let them believe they have one. I looked at the blue glow of the tablet. $850,000. Perjury. Loan sharks. It was a balance sheet of a different kind. I will give them exactly what they want, I replied. My voice was clinical. I will play the defeated daughter. I will pay the bill. Inside Eric's bunker, the air was cool and smelled of ozone. I rubbed my eyes trying to summon regret, but there was only clarity. This wasn't a breakdown. This was accounting. My family had been overdrawing on my compassion for 32 years. Now, it was time to close the account. The mansion in the Garden District was a masterpiece of iron and wrought. It looked like a temple of success from the outside, but inside, the air was heavy with the smell of old money and fresh greed. Christopher sat in his high-backed leather chair, holding a glass of sampan. Melissa stood by the window, her smile as fixed and artificial as her plastic surgery. Madison didn't even pretend to care about the decor. She kept looking at her watch, her fingers tapping a nervous rhythm on her thigh. She needed that payout. $850,000 of debt does not wait for pleasantries, and the loan sharks in Atlanta were already counting the minutes. I sat in the middle of their celebration like a ghost. I played the part of the defeated daughter perfectly. I kept my head down, my shoulders slumped, and my voice was a fragile whisper. I told them I could not fight anymore. I told them the grief was too much and I just wanted them to take over. Christopher gave me a lecture on responsibility and family legacy, his voice booming with a false authority. Melissa patted my hand with those cold, dry fingers, telling me that life would be so much easier now that the adults were in charge. They thought they had finally broken me. They thought they had successfully gaslit a mother into believing she was insane while her son was barely cold in the ground. I opened my laptop and placed it on the mahogany table. I typed in the numbers with a deliberate, slow precision. $450,000. It was the first installment of the trust fund they had worked so hard to steal. I hit the transfer button. The chime of the confirmation was like a starting pistol. They toasted. Christopher, Melissa, and Madison raised their glasses, the expensive crystal clinking with a sound of victory. They drank that sampan like it was Jacob's lifeblood. They were already discussing the coastal estate, the fresh start, the new life they would build on the ruins of mine. And then, the silence was broken by Christopher's phone. It was a sharp, aggressive ring. He answered it with a confident hello, but within seconds, the confidence evaporated. His face turned a sickly shade of gray. His hand started to tremble, nearly dropping the crystal glass. Federal hold, he whispered. What do you mean, frozen? I stood up. My back was straight for the first time in years. The icy clarity was no longer a hidden sensation, it was my armor. The Internal Revenue Service works fast when they receive a whistleblower report with documented evidence of money laundering, I said. My voice was clinical and calm. Yesterday, I handed over the ledger from the Atlanta gambling ring. I flagged every account you used to co-sign Madison's debt. That transfer I just made? It was the trigger. It confirmed the connection between your accounts and the illegal funds. Madison shrieked, her phone slipping from her hand. Melissa began to stammer, her savior facade crumbling into a mask of pure terror. You are trapped, I told them, looking Christopher dead in the eyes. The government has frozen your assets for an investigation into felony fraud. And since that money never actually made it to the loan sharks, I imagine those men in Atlanta are going to be very curious about where their $850,000 went. I didn't wait for an answer. I didn't need one. I walked out of the mansion as the first sounds of a real psychotic break, theirs, not mine, began to echo through the rot of the Garden District. The aftermath was as clinical as the sting itself. Madison disappeared within 48 hours, likely fleeing the state before those men from Atlanta could decide that her life was worth less than the $850,000 she owed them. My parents did not fare much better. Without the access to my son's $2,800,000 trust, their carefully constructed world of artificial status collapsed. They lost the Garden District mansion within 90 days. I heard through an old neighbor that they moved into a cramped, one-bedroom apartment in a part of the city they used to deem beneath them. Ironic, considering they had spent decades deeming me beneath them. I received the whistleblower reward from the Internal Revenue Service shortly after the investigation into their felony fraud concluded. It was a substantial sum, more than enough to ensure that I would never have to restore another historic relic for anyone but myself. But the money was never the point. The point was the closure. The point was the balance sheet finally reaching zero. I used the entirety of Jacob's trust to establish the Jacob Morgan Astronomy Scholarship. He loved the stars, and now, he will help other children reach for them. It is a legacy built on growth rather than the exploitation my family intended. I am standing in a quiet corner of a Garden District park now, watching the stars through a telescope that once belonged to my son. I do not feel grief, and I certainly do not feel guilt. I feel a clean, quiet silence that I have not known in 32 years. You see, some people will tell you that family is the most important thing, that blood is a bond that should never be broken regardless of the cost. They will tell you that you must forgive, that you must keep carrying the weight of people who only know how to take. But I am here to tell you that sometimes, the greatest act of self-love is the decision to walk away. Abandoning a toxic family is not an act of cruelty, it is an act of liberation. It is the moment you stop allowing your compassion to be a luxury they overdraft, and you finally close the account for good. This is the realization that comes when you stop seeking validation from people who are incapable of giving it. It is the moment you find your own worth, independent of the roles they try to force you to play. I realized that night at the mansion that I didn't lose my family. I simply stopped carrying them. And for the first time in my life, I can breathe. If this story spoke to your heart or if you believe that justice should always be served, please share this video. Let's build a community where the truth is never silenced.